Thanks for joining us for another complimentary gathering where we will cover a recent topic that might be of interest to our listeners, and we can answer any questions that have come in during the week, again, to just try to help anybody listening to learn more about the firm and learn more about topics relating to divorce and separation and co-parenting. Karen, you had an interesting topic that that you thought we could discuss today that would be really helpful to people going through this process.
Well, thank you. It actually kind of stemmed from the news, and also too, we do get this question at the firm as well. So it's kind of a twofold thing. I guess really the core of the question is, what's the difference between, like legal custody and physical custody? I think that comes up a lot, especially as people are going through the details of their documents and their agreements. And that was kind of spurred on by the case that's come out with the Real Housewife of Atlanta, Kim Zolciak, and her husband, Kroy Biermann, getting a divorce or announcing their divorce this week. And of course, they have all the assets discussions around that. They, rumor has it they had a foreclosure on their house beforehand. And then, of course, the kids, and he's actually seeking, full legal custody and physical custody of the kids, which is a little bit unique.
It is unique. It is unique. And I agree, those terms can be confusing and people question those terms, or people will use those terms. And then I have to ask follow-up questions just to ascertain if they know what the terms mean, because as an attorney, physical custody and legal custody are two very different things. And sometimes they're used interchangeably by divorce professionals and people just talking casually about divorce. But they're two very specific things. And so I agree, when you see in the news or headlines that a relationship that you thought was just fine, they have many children, it seems they have many privileges in life, it's surprising to hear that the dad would then be abruptly asking for both joint physical and joint legal custody. So what do those terms mean? Here in Illinois, we actually don't use those terms, but we right? We use terms that are similar. And so we might, on a national level, hear news, and other states might use those terms. So I'll describe those today. So when you talk about joint legal custody, to interpret that into Illinois language, that is the allocation of decision-making responsibilities. So that really is talking about legal custody. You get to make those significant decisions relating to your child or children that concern medical decisions, educational decisions, religious decisions, and extracurricular decisions. So when you want legal custody, that also could be called sole custody. Or here in Illinois, we now have that long term about it's really an allocation of decision-making responsibilities. You want sole allocation. You want to be the person that makes all of those significant decisions for your children. And so many people don't want to use that big mouthful of terminology to just say, I want to make all the decisions for my kid. So I want legal custody of my kid. When people start talking about they want legal custody and they want physical custody, again, I interpret that as parenting time or visitation. It really just means day to day, where's your child or children going to be? And so physical custody, that usually means somebody wants primary time. They want the most time they can with the children. They might be thinking they want all of the time with the children. But here in Illinois, we now call it parenting time. Used to be called visitation. And so those are the two big core concepts that go into your parenting plan, your custody plan, your legal and physical custody plan.
Can I ask, did Illinois used to use the terms? And then they've kind of adapted over the years to make it less legalese, it sounds like.
Yeah, when the divorce statute was essentially rewritten, there was a lot of conversation about perhaps softening up the language. I think it was attempts to clarify what truly we are doing. We're allocating decision-making responsibilities. You might not have any more rights than the other parent. You just happen to make education decisions. Maybe the other parent makes medical decisions. And so there was a lot of thought that was put into not talking about custody, not talking about visitation, but talking about parenting time for the child and talking about decision-making responsibilities. But at the end of the day, regular people use the terminology that is in the news, that their friends use, that used to be used. And so we just have to reinterpret that. And I would say that a lot of times when I talk to children about their parenting schedule or their parenting plan, the younger kids are understanding what that means. So I think as we move forward, there will be an evolution of the terminology because it's becoming more used. The younger kids are hearing it more about my parenting time schedule rather than I have visitation with my dad or I have visitation with my mom. So I have noticed that with the children that I interview, that they are pretty in tune with the new terminology. Just the rest of us, we tend to use common terms, older terms, outdated maybe terms.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think when speaking in general, right, and not the legal aspect of it per se, it's easier to use shorter terms to get your point across, and I mean, I think it's natural, that a question for you though regarding the two. So I understand the differences in Illinois, for legal and physical custody. Can you have, let's say, physical custody, which is, visitation, or let's say there is no visitation, right? Can you have one and not the other if legal custody is decision making and physical custody is, parenting time, visitation time, but there isn't any? Can it still be separated?
So it would
Kind
be
of a confusing question.
I think it would be difficult, but technically, yes, you could have variances between the two. I would say that to try to put an illustration to the question that you posed, Tyler, maybe somebody's living out of state, so they don't have parenting time, they don't have visitation as frequent as if they lived in a very similar area, or excuse me, just same town. And so that's how I interpret, like with no visitation or no parenting
Okay.
time. Maybe logistically they don't have that, but they could have decision-making responsibilities because they would still need to communicate with the other parent about all of those significant decision-making responsibilities I discussed earlier. So that might be an example of you don't have frequent parenting time. Maybe you see your child during breaks or on the summer, or maybe you don't because of various circumstances, but there might be joint decision-making responsibilities. And so you would still communicate, be involved, get notices of things that, the child's going through. The flip side of that, it would be hard to have all of the decision-making responsibilities if you don't see the child frequently, because how would you make the decision solely about extracurriculars, doctor's appointments, religious activities? So I would say if you don't have parenting time for either because it's a serious endangerment to the child or because of logistics and location of the parent, it would be difficult to have sole legal custody, sole decision-making responsibility, simply because you're not interacting with the child or people that are interacting with the child because you're not having time with the child. So usually if you're talking about sole legal custody, you probably are the primary caretaker for that child and you see that child most often.
Yeah.
But,
Well, I
but you
could see
can
why,
have joint decision-making responsibilities and not see the child, as long as it's safe for the child.
well, and I can see from your examples maybe why Illinois has tried to soften the language, because just based on what you said, you can, and I appreciate you bringing up the example of living out of state, because when I asked my question, I confused myself as to what I was asking, but you hit it kind of right on the head. I was thinking more of, for argument's sake, the parents live next door, but one doesn't see the other, that kind of thing. But you're right. If, there's no physical contact for whatever reason, living out of state, living overseas, maybe they're in the military, stuff like that.
Right.
You can still have the joint decision making, and have decision making responsibilities. So that's it's interesting, and I think it makes sense why maybe, commonly we'll use the legal custody, physical custody, but maybe why Illinois on the legal side has kind of gotten away from that,
Right.
See,
because
I like,
it's
oh,
more in depth than those two general terms.
yeah. I think to add on to that, Tyler, like to your point, that it's more descriptive. It gets away from that percentage conversation, like 60-40 or 50-50, right? It's actually about what you're going to do for the child
Yeah.
in that role, right? And I think that's a really big distinction to make with that. That's what I heard when I heard those, terms. So
Yeah,
it gets away from those numbers and those kind of things.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it also divides up a very big concept into smaller parts, and to say, we're not just giving this whole thing to one person, so you've lost. Maybe we allocate a few things between the two of you, if that's appropriate for the best interest of the child. And so, yeah, we've come a little bit away from some of those common terms, but you're still going to see it in the news because it's concise, it's to the point. But just know, legal custody is more about decision making, and physical custody is more about having the child with you, who has possession of the child. And Karen, in your example of this celebrity divorce, if that's what we would call it, for him asking for both, essentially what he's looking for is sole custody and primary care of all of those kids. He wants to be the majority parent that has the most parenting time with those kids. Whether that will be the outcome remains to be seen. But he's sending a message that there's either high conflict in the family, that perhaps they're unable to communicate, or perhaps there is a safety issue that he's alleging the mom shouldn't be around the child. Whether those allegations are true, don't know. That's why there are other professionals that will figure that out.
Well, it would be interesting to see in that case if they will be co-parents or parallel parents.
Yep.
That's right. That's right.
Absolutely.
And that ties into a blog and a podcast that we have done on those topics. So if you want to learn more about if co-parenting is appropriate for you or parallel parenting, take a look over at birtlaw.com and you can learn more about that.
Great.
Why don't we take some questions that might have been asked during the week that could be helpful to others that might have similar questions?
Sure. I have a couple of questions that we've gotten, and I think the first one that we'll ask is, somebody asked, are we on social media? And I know we have a website, and a couple other things, but Erin, I think you could let everybody know we are on social media. What are we on?
Absolutely. And I might even forget, we are on so many different platforms to help our clients. Our social media is really a great free resource for anybody contemplating divorce or separation. We spend a lot of time gathering and organizing information on all of our social media platforms to help you start preparing, learning about issues that may be present or that may resonate with you that you want to address through your separation or divorce process. And so you can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on LinkedIn. You can find this meeting and other meetings on YouTube. And you can also find us on Pinterest. And so each one of those social platforms, we have different information. We don't post the same thing on every platform. For instance, Pinterest, you might have more family-centered activities that you can do, or new traditions that you might want to come up with, or recipes or things to do with your children. On YouTube, you're going to have a deeper dive into legal issues with our podcast and our complementary gatherings. LinkedIn, a professional resource or platform there. We really focus a lot on some of the financial issues that come up in separation and parenting, or excuse me, parenting as well, but separation and divorce and parenting. And when you look at Instagram and Facebook, I would say Facebook is probably the most comprehensive at this time. We have a little bit of everything there. And Instagram, we have a lot of not self-help quotes, but quotes that inspire you or make you reflect during your process. We have a wellness page on our website, and wellness of our clients going through a very difficult process is one of our priorities. And so on Instagram, you can find frequent postings about just motivational quotes or information that might help you get through a difficult topic. And so check out all of our different platforms. I think there's a lot of great free information there that you can use either as a client or somebody that's just thinking about, what are their next steps for their relationship.
And I think you touched on it briefly, but we do have podcasts available too. I know we can get our podcast on Apple Music, but I believe we can get it. They're on Spotify?
Yeah, so it's Apple, it's Spotify, and right on our website, we have a page, a podcast page that has all of our podcasts that you can listen to the audio, and we also have all of the transcripts.
Oh, that's great.
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay. I think, just a last quick question, for you, Aaron. People ask all the time, we obviously as a firm, we bill our clients monthly, and we have invoices that are sent out that need to be paid. But, especially in these times right now, and that's going on and everything, people are asking, can I pay my bill over time? Is that an option? And the short answer is yes, it is an option. But Aaron, you could speak to how that's an option.
Absolutely. Can you pay over time? Yes, you can. I firmly believe that all people should have access to legal services or to mediation. And so if you want to work with our firm, you feel that we're a good fit for you, but you're just concerned about finances and your preference is to pay over time, but perhaps you don't want to put it on a credit card. Maybe you're just looking for an alternative. You can go to our Pay Now tab on our website, and there's information about client credit. And what client credit is it's you apply for it. There's again instructions on our website for how you can do that. But it is essentially a loan for legal or mediation services that you can then apply for. You find out very quickly if you qualify for it. And my understanding is one of the benefits of using that is the interest rate's lower, and it doesn't affect your credit history the same that maybe perhaps other loans would. And so, check that out. I think it's a great resource. We've had more people being able to address their family matters sooner rather than later because of that resource. And it is our primary preferred resource for if you need to pay over time. Clearly, other options are available to you. That could be a loan from a third party, that could be a loan from a family member. We do take credit cards, and a lot of people pay with credit cards. But you have to make a decision as to what's best for you, your finances, your credit history. But we try to make as much available payment option wise and payment plan wise.
Yeah, well, that's great information.
Okay,
Appreciate
well,
it.
thank you. I don't see any other questions coming in. Do either of you have any other questions that we could address today?
No, thank you.
Nope.
Okay, well, I think this was a really great meeting. We were able to cover a lot of information about physical custody and legal custody, how Illinois handles those matters, and about how you can find some great free resources if you're still in that contemplation phase or if you're in that research phase for your divorce or separation. So thank you for joining us. If you have any questions or want to join us at our next meeting, please contact the office and we'll provide you with those details. But thank you for being here and thank you for listening.